we're just going to jump in. This is a little bit about me. I do executive coaching, learning, writing, all sorts of things. And if you want to know more about me, just feel free to ping me. LinkedIn is a great place to ping me if you can't find me on email. But this group of people I'm very fond of, because I have been a woman in technology since 2004, and I'm so happy that groups like you exist. This is the agenda that we're going to cover off today. First of all, we're going to talk about the skills that you need. So I'm going to try not to send you into executive interviewing without talking first about what are some of the key things that we need to make sure that we've got in our bag of skills. Considering the investment, it takes a lot of time to interview in general, let alone for senior level and executive level roles. We're going to talk about preparation, so some tips, and then taking charge. So do you have what it takes? So I could do probably a 3-hour workshop just on executive essential skills, but we're going to move high level through it. And some of this might be obvious to some of you. That's okay. It's just a good reminder. And from my experience, a lot of leaders feel like it's obvious, but they're not necessarily fully prepared. So what I haven't included, though, just to note in this, is subject matter expertise in particular areas. For example, if you have domain expertise in development, you're going to have a lot of other skills that are not listed on here. I spent some time with, just to check what was really hot in the market right now. I spent some time with some executive search people, and I basically narrowed it in on what all of the executive search people are seeing as the hot skills that they want to see, as well as some industry intel and my experience as well. I drew from that. Okay. So many people don't realize what more senior roles entail. So it's important to remember, and lots of you have heard this and do know this, because you're a great supervisor might not mean that you'll be a great divisional director, and so on and so forth. So, for example, if you have a sales manager, they're really great at building and mobilizing teams, and then they move to a divisional director. This particular role might take on a lot more instead of like being able to handle the numbers, it might be understanding and creating, information for other parties. It might turn on a very much an analytical mindset that someone who's a sales manager might not have in this particular role. So this is called the Peter Principle. If any of you haven't heard about it, it's quite fascinating. It goes a bit deeper than where I'm going today because I'm keeping it a little bit high level for you. But a lot of more hierarchical organizations and orgs less skilled in recruitment or training tend to be choked up with people problems rooted in promoting people above levels of competency. So in terms of the first, executive skill set, effective executives figure out where they are competent for themselves. Maybe they informational interview with other people. Highly, highly recommend. Talk to people in roles you're curious about. One of the executive search people was emphatically wanting me to tell all of you that the business community is much nicer and much warmer than we think. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Finding out what they feel and what they think are important in terms of the competence required for the skill, people that are in similar roles. There's entrepreneurial DNA in really successful executives, this insatiable curiosity, like what makes this successful? So in addition to this concept around competencies around the roles itself, a lot of the cutting edge research is talking about, if I'm just going to focus on two, because we all know leadership can go really deep and really long in terms of what skills you need, but at the very minimum, having vision, being able to paint a picture of vision and handle change management is massive. So I know you can all appreciate how much change is happening right now. It's just massive. And so being able to move through that delicately. I'm not sure how many you've had leadership that you're experiencing right now that maybe they're not dealing with change so well. Anyone experiencing that, feel free to throw in the chat. Well, I guess you might incriminate someone, so you don't have to, but it can be quite messy if leadership doesn't know how to work through change management. There's lots of wonderful, wonderful resources like Cotter and other books out there. So, and recruiters are looking for evidence of this in your experience. So as you're moving along in your career, noting your experience around building change and like working through change and vision, really powerful. So as a recommendation, you want to build a recommendation on each of these. And it's only one recommendation because there's lots of things we can go through. But one way to build your leadership skills beyond, recognizing the competencies required is basically working with volunteering opportunities on boards and associations. So a lot of the executive search people I talk to, and in my experience and other people, you can't necessarily get some of the experience you want. So you don't know how good you are. So your level of, it's called unconscious incompetence. So hopefully we want to bring it to conscious incompetence and be able to understand, okay, what does strategy really look like? I'm going to do it as a board member or an association member, but whatever kind of area that you can get more experience in on a volunteer capacity, if you have the bandwidth to be able to do that, can be really, really wonderful. Even committees, some people say that their strata has given them some interesting experience. I don't know if that would qualify, but I mean, I'm sure some people have developed some wonderful people skills. All right, so in terms of the next skill around character, we could do so much around this. So displaying resiliency, adaptability, persistence, integrity, these are the types of things around character. Do you know yourself? If I like to say very simplistically, if you were a car, you know, metaphorically, because I think in metaphor, if you were a car and you didn't know if you were an off-roader or a Ferrari, if you were big, if your chassis is hanging in the back, if you're headed in the right direction, how much gas is in your tank, you're going to hit people and you're going to not enjoy the ride and maybe not even get to the destination you want. So knowing yourself is huge. And in terms of leadership, having those resiliency, adaptability, and my absolute favorite skill that I love in leadership is curiosity. Curiosity is like the antidote to judgment and labeling. I should say judgment where it's labeling like this is bad, and it closes off your ability to see potential opportunities. So curiosity is something that we look for in leadership. So, and do you know your own values? Have you got something that helps you make decisions by? So a recommendation, exploring tools like StrengthsFinder, if you haven't done that before, I love the fact, I wish someone had told me this when I was younger, because I think I wasted years, well, I didn't waste them, but they were a little more painful than they needed to be. Being strong at things and not noticing that I was actually miserable. So a strength is, the way Marcus defines it, a strength is something that energizes you, not something that depletes you. So notice what you're doing today and what you're being asked to do. And are those strengths in alignment? Because, you know, if we only live once, it would be nice to enjoy what we actually do. I don't have to preach that one. And if you want to do a little bit more values work, Brené Brown has kind of an analytical approach to it in her book, Dare to Lead. I run through it with coaching clients. I have an exercise I can give you. You're welcome to contact me. I'm happy to help you through that. Okay, so next one we have, everyone can hear? Technology's good? Okay, great. Just wanted to double check. Okay, my clicker just got off the screen. There we are. Okay, so next one, massive, 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 whoops. Okay, there we are. My massive one is EQ. Maybe you guys are getting bored hearing about EQ. I'm not sure where you're sitting at with it, but if you haven't heard too much about it, if I were to say the top two skills, it would be, EQ would be the absolute top one. When you consider, oh, actually I should define it for you first. There's so many big, long, lengthy definitions of EQ. The one that's really simple is the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions, as well as the emotions of others, okay? So we weren't taught this stuff in school. That's why I really love the book I listed down below by Mark Brackett, Permission to Fail. He talks about school and our emotional literacy is really limited. So how do we decode what someone who just blew up just did if we can't even understand it for ourselves? So investigating emotional intelligence is a fantastic skill to build no matter where you're at in your career. And it involves self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, all those sorts of things. And what was I going to tell you? If I had a story for you, I would say, oh yes, and if you can take tests on emotional intelligence if you feel like it. That tests tend to go with EQI. You can see the next book that I've listed down below, but our emotions affect everybody like a waterfall. There's some fascinating stuff out there. And you know what's interesting? Emotional intelligence only came out in the really big book accepted form in the 1990s. They were championing it back in the 70s, but in the 1990s is where it's really got a toehold. So we've come a ways, but we still have a long ways to go. Oh yes, and I was going to mention this. When you think about how we create innovation and be competitive in our companies and our endeavors, before it was like the top downs, you know, raining down all the information from on high, and we were treated like, you know, factory minions, and some of us still are, which is really something I'm really earnestly hoping we can change really soon. And so now, as many of you know, we're working in teams. creativity that is needed can't scale from one person, and it's very limited. We need creativity from everyone. And when you need these skills, you need them to come from people that actually feel okay, because creativity doesn't come from people who are just like running on a treadmill and bracing themselves. It comes from people who feel comfortable, they have trust, they have psychological safety. So all of this EQ stuff is massive. So if you're leading people, oh, it's a great thing to invest in, okay? And if any of these things are too deep, because we're really going high level, remember you can talk with Holly and I, there's lots more we could share, okay? And then intellect, we can't underestimate intellect. It can grow just like EQ. Strategy, strategy is basically what's the plan in a challenging situation. So the ability to capture and define a business strategy beyond the original product or concept and garner support of stakeholders. That's what strategy is. So again, like I mentioned before, if you're lacking in the strategy skills, you can build them on other boards, associations, and so forth. Enterprising thought processes around coming up with ideas, many ideas, or is your thinking limited and rigid with policies when you've been working with other companies? So recruiters are looking for, like, are you just going to import a culture and this is who you are? Or are you curious and taking the best from one and combining it with the best for other and creating innovation? Analytically, looking for multiple variables. So when problem solving, do you fold in concepts and attributes to make others stretch to understand the bigger pictures, and with sharp communication skills? So on the subject of analytical skills, one of the second behind EQ that many of the really wonderful people that know a lot about what is required of senior level successful people is, can you connect the dots? So what is this, especially in tricky situations? So what does this mean? So if you got a paper and a pen, would you like to play? If you've done this exercise before, roll your eyes like, oh my gosh, Teresa, we've seen this before. But if you haven't, give yourself a moment, and probably give you about a minute, which isn't very long. So don't don't be hard on yourself if you don't solve it in that time. But try, you see the instructions right there. Try to connect the dots, the 9 dots, with no more than 4 straight lines without lifting your hand from the paper. So take a moment and try. I feel like I should go do, do, do,
Yeah.
do, do.
Once you all get it done, put a yes or an I tried and failed valiantly, whatever is accurate for your situation in the chat, so we know you're done.
Ah, look at, awesome. Okay, great. While you're doing this, if you're finding it challenging, try to notice the story you might be telling yourself. Like, this is too hard, it doesn't make sense, I'm frustrated, it's not possible. What are your go-to solves? On the subject of knowing yourself, these are wonderful exercises to peek inside how you encounter certain challenges. Of course, this is very context specific, but it still is an interesting experiment for you, for your benefit. Okay, so I'm going, and Kita. Okay, got it. All right, so you guys ready? I'm gonna show you the answer, okay? Okay. Okay. Here we go. First line. Dun 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 dun. Next line. A little bit laggy system. Bear with me. Next line. Do do do. There you go.
It's like you were drawing it in real time, Teresa, as you had to think about it.
I know, like the PowerPoint was like, oh. So how was that for you guys in the chat? I shouldn't say you guys, my apologies. I should say, how was that for everyone?
I'll say this, I just noped right out of it. I never did it. I hate these types of exercises, so I just didn't.
Exactly. Same? Okay, cool, cool. I am bad. Tatiana, you are not bad. You did it wrong. Okay, so this is like rich self-investigation. You are not bad. Oh my God.
Yeah, let's intervene. None of you are bad. This is a tiny exercise with 9 dots. This is not your whole worth.
Yes.
No more. I'm going to outlaw that. No more saying I'm bad in the chat.
No.
Unacceptable.
Okay,
I
so
love the 2 of you have said it, but no more.
this is a perfect real time, and it's not, I know you guys are playing, you're not totally serious necessarily, but If you have a thought, I am bad, that's where you're labeling. So curiosity is the antidote to labeling. It's like, how could this be different? As soon as we say bad, good all the time, things can get really, really heavy, especially when they're bad in our label. So the one of the keys to resiliency and adaptability is not letting yourself go to bad, but letting yourself go to okay. So thank you so much for sharing. That was really awesome. I by the way, I couldn't do it, and we had longer on the exercise. And some people, like maybe some of you, Googled it. Did anyone Google the answer? It's like crickets. No one Googled the answer? See, that's interesting, because when I did it, they're like, well, who Googled it? They're like, well, that would be appropriate. But we're so programmed in so many respects to follow, like, this is exactly how things go. Well, can you tell me exactly how the future's gonna go? Because I'm pretty sure we don't know. So it's a really lovely investigation into like where am I believing that life is just in these boxes? Because if you can open up, like, and not where you're compromising your values, but expanding your thinking, can I connect the dots a little bit, broader than what I would be, than what I was ingrained to do when I was put in school? Those can be wonderful things. Another way you can help yourself build that capacity, and I know that could be an irritating exercise and a wonderful exercise depending on how you experience puzzles, so thank you for playing, but a great way to build is general knowledge. I remember seeing a documentary about Bill Gates where he would go on to planes with these like ugly shopping bags full of books, and they were books from everything. And if you notice other things that are not maybe totally related to the job you have, but you have some kind of joy and some delight about, maybe you love paleontology in South America and you're reading on it, you never know when maybe there's a framework of understanding or something that is interesting that causes you to have some kind of pattern recognition in the work that you're doing. You just don't know. But following your bliss a little bit and expanding your general knowledge can also help you connect the dots. In terms of business intelligence, connecting the dots in the business itself, super important. When you're getting to these very senior roles, as people who are already in them know, it's very important to make sure that you're understanding a lot more about how you run a business. So you're trying to know a bit more of what a CEO would know in terms of what's a P&L statement in finance, how does the cash and balance sheet, how do those three things work together? How does like the different areas, so if you have CS in one of your departments, or if you have marketing, understanding more about all of these different pieces and how they fit together, it's like a superpower, especially because organizations might get a little bit more flatter, a little bit more agile. We hope in the future, knowing more about what's going on and embracing your own entrepreneur and understanding about what's possible in the organization is huge. So financials are huge, and interdependency, understanding interdependency. So often you get people like, I'm really good at what I'm good at and that's it. And you might be successful in that regard, but if you want to just open up the stratosphere of opportunity, then look at building your knowledge, because when you're in that board meeting and they say something, you don't sit there and go, I don't know what they're talking about. You might actually have something that you can say. So in diagnosing the situation, this one I love because it involves frameworks, which of course I enjoy, and understanding where business is at, where it's going on, like, is it owned by a parent, by a parent, by a parent company? The climate, you guys are seeing a lot of really interesting things happen in the market right now, some of which are absolutely terrifying. And a great way to diagnose businesses is the recommendation that I put here is Chris Walkstein's The First 90 Days. He talks about understanding the stages of the company, and it allows you to pick opportunities that are more suited to you, what you would enjoy. So this is like just a slightly, complex little quick sketch of what he's talking about in terms of diagnosing where a business is at, if you haven't seen this before. And I do recommend, by the way, The First 90 Days book for everyone. Even if you aren't starting a new job, sometimes you can restart your job with some of this understanding and framework, or it's good for if you got promoted too. But basically, if you are, say, for example, in a turnaround, and a lot of businesses are in a turnaround right now, that's where, the crap is hitting the fan. It's like, it requires, we need to batten down the hatches because we have to save this business. So in a turnaround, what kind of leadership is required? How does that affect my department? What do I need to do? And so what you'll find is traditionally, and this is speaking generally, not completely specifically, but leaders who have the ability to paint a vision of this is where we're going to go, and they're very skilled in combating despair. They are all about hope. Some people would call it a heroine type of figure, okay? And then startup, you might be a leader who's really good at channeling excited confusion into productive directions. Realignment, unlike the, the heroine that's like clearing the path and pushing through to get things done, realignment is when it's like the business is maybe not doing so great, potentially the numbers are a little off, but otherwise everyone's, hanging on just fine. It takes a lot more of like stewardship, like diplomatic and influence to help paint the picture of like, yeah, I get you're here, but we really need to think about where it's going to go. Sustaining success is when it's preserving the vitality of a successful organization. So you need to invent the challenge and combat complacency. So you'll have all of these types of things, even in microcosms, realignment, startups, turnarounds within your department, sometimes even within a team. But it's a really handy framework to help you understand what's going on in a business, okay? All right, so now that we've gone through those essential skills, we want to consider, are you ready for the investment? Because it does take some serious time to be able to interview for these roles. So in the chat, love for you guys to take a stab at guessing. In terms of executive, so I'm going to augment this question with executive interaction hours for interviewing. How many hours do you think it takes for an executive to move through a hiring process on average? Okay, so guess. Numbers are in the chat. Louisa, 100 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours. Yeah, lots, including wait time. Yep, 2,000 hours? Oh my gosh. 48. Okay, interesting. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to tell you that I would say the average good software engineering interview that's well done is around 10 to 12 hours, including tests. Some might disagree depending on unique pieces of their process. That's been what I've seen across the industry. And I chatted with a friend of mine who just got an engineering manager job, and her first opportunity she talked to was 5 hours total for an engineering manager role. And the other job opportunity she was talking to was 25 hours. Quite a disparity. So what's your guess for how long? So the first one was speed to hire. Now we're talking about time to hire. So how long you think an executive process? How many months do you think it lasts? 3 to 6? 3? Yep. 5? 6? Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people know me, so they might know a bit more about this answer. So an average software engineering interview that's really well done, industry standards around 3 weeks, depending on context. Of course, these are very generalities that I'm speaking in. The friend that I mentioned, her 5-hour interview process took 3 weeks, but 5 hours is on the low side for sure. And her 25-hour one took 3 months. You know which job she took? Can you guess which one? The interview process had a huge part of it. No, she took the 3 weeks one. She was so drained by the 3 months, she didn't take it. They kept, taking her in many different directions. So the answer is, on average, 30 to 47 hours of time commitment, and this is interaction time and preparation time, and 3 months from end to end is a beginning point. Usually I've had it where it's like 6 to 8 months, depending on the role and how much executives have codified what it is that they're looking for. I should also note 30 to 47 hours. If this is in the world where people can meet in person, that doesn't include flights and hotels and all that stuff. So it's a massive time commitment. So what kind of steps are involved? This is a traditional executive interviewing process that's well-run process-wise, hopefully. You can see you've got 3 recruiter interviews to go through. Usually it's like an individual recruiter at the beginning and then 2 people talking with you in a room, 2 recruiters. Sometimes executive search is involved in those interviews at the very beginning. On-sites, we used to call them, but they're not on-site anymore right now, at least for some companies. But the remotes, the formal ones, the structured interviews, at least for those, before it was a lot of informal meals. Those might might take on more of a casual conversation, but there's a lot that's lost in not meeting people in person, but it's not a landslide defeat because there's a lot you can do remotely. Presentations, case studies, personality profile. There are some companies that actually use those for their general hiring process. When it comes to executive, usually it's a much thorough one. For example, I had top 3 candidates and we spent $2,000 per candidate on comprehensive personality profiles, so really expensive. And then offer negotiation can either happen pretty quickly. Hopefully the recruiter is closing you as you move through the process from the beginning with, they should be talking compensation from the start so there's no surprises. But I've seen offer negotiations go at least 3 months in some big companies. So I just want to warn everyone that interviews can suck. Does anyone have an interview that has sucked before? Yeah. So painful. There's so much pain out there. We don't need this kind of pain. Well, in fact, with executive interviews, if you do a little bit of research, 40% of executives on this one study I read, and there were some other ones that were even worse, 40% of executives hired into role within 18 months were terminated, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Let's just like let that number linger. Like that's almost half. So people are like, well, yeah, why bother, right? So yeah, that's why you need to negotiate a good salary. Yes, and termination clauses. So within another study that had about 50% of executives that were terminated in the span of 2 years, 45% of those people indicated they had minimal understanding of the challenges they would face in an executive role. Like, what's going on? What are people doing? What are people doing from both ends? I remember being in a situation where I had some executives that were interviewing candidates for a particular C-suite position at one of the companies I worked at before. And there was a moment where the candidate's like, okay, so what's your vision? And I watched the interviewer fumble and not be able to even answer the question. And it happened multiple times. And I realized that they were really, they didn't know what they wanted. I knew to a degree, but there is nothing like being in an interview and having that moment where your executive can't articulate a vision. And so a lot of times the hard part about executive interviews, and I'm empathetic to this because people don't know what they need and they're looking for someone to come and help them. So that's totally fine and totally, you know, it can happen. But at least people, both sides, need to be aware of those gaps as opposed to just come help me, come solve it. It doesn't do both of you any good because you might not have the aptitude or the skills to be able to meet the need, but you need to get some clarity on that. So it's important because of those stats to make sure that you're interviewing, that you take responsibility and set yourself up for success. So let's prepare. We're going to talk about some interview tips now. All right, and I'm just going to double check my time, make sure we're doing well. Okay, great. Good. Okay, so we're just a couple minutes over, but I'm going to speed it up on this point here. So love this quote, Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Now, types of interview questions, you'll be familiar. Some of this will be boring to some of you, and some of you take note. If you don't know this, you need to. Behavioral goes into your past experience. Massively important to think about this one. Situational, what would you do if? Situational, very powerful for technical questions and to augment behavioral questions, and close-ended yes and no's. You'll find actually that in certain interviews that if it doesn't feel very prepared and people not really sure, like they don't seem to have a level of sophistication in the interview, sometimes you can decode it by the amount of situational questions they ask. Because if they don't ask about your past experience, how are they going to know how what you've done applies? Okay. So if you're answering a behavioral question, what's the standard format your answer should follow? Throw it in the chat if you know. There you go. Thanks, Oz. Yes, she's right. So situation, task, action, result. And some of you are like, oh, this is so boring. As an interviewee, especially as an executive, you're being asked to be a storyteller. You're trying to tell stories about what you've done in the past and how it applies to the future. So with situation, task, action, result, it's a very handy framework, not only to answer interview questions, but to help you with telling stories, okay? And people love stories because our brain's actually wired to receive that, because we spent how many tens of thousands of years with no writing and all about oral tradition. Our brain is wired in this way. If you can't remember situation, task, action, result, just remember SAR, situation, action, and result. What was going on? Think of it like a movie scene where you're going in and you're describing the characters in the scene, what was going on, what you did, and what was the result. So we're just going to take you through really quickly an example of STAR if I was going to answer it. So I know this is an interviewing basic, but if you haven't got this nailed, it's really important to practice this skill as an interviewer. And if you interview people, practicing this and being able to hear it is really, really important skill to develop as an executive to be able to recruit effectively, listening for the answer and be able to probe for it. So situation, what's the situation? As the VP of HR, I had high regrettable turnovers. So that's all my high performers were starting to punt. And it started to go about 3/4. So this would be an answer to a question such as, could you tell me about a time when you faced a significant challenge in your HR department, or in your company rather? And so I would say, we had lots of people leaving and they were really, really good. So I'm gonna go very high level here, but ideally you wanna give a few numbers and statistics. That's why I'm going to say this over and over again, and if I don't, note this. Try to keep track of your accomplishments, the numbers, the people involved in the scenarios. Maybe it's in your notebook, maybe it's on a spreadsheet that you keep over a few years, but we forget. The longer you get in your career, you're like, oh, I had that skill, oh, I did that. You will forget some things. So this is really important stuff to help you tell stories that are really pertinent to the next role you want to interview for. So I had turnover, it was really alarming. So what we did is we made a goal of reducing regrettable turnover within 2/4, and we wanted to reduce it by at least 5% of the total amount. We presented the problem to my HR team. We brainstormed. Bob and Sue were really good at analysis, so they made sure that they confirmed the numbers. And Jenny was really great at understanding how to get who are the high performers in the company, because we hadn't codified it because we were at a size where we were just figuring out all of this stuff. And what we did was we decided to do stay interviews, and stay interviews help people be able to articulate what they were feeling and help us catch even some new hires that had been hired and the managers hadn't yet really connected with them and they felt like they were hanging. So in just the result was we managed to reduce, and as you can see the results written right there, we reduced it, we even doubled the amount by reducing it 10% with cost savings, which we reinvested. That's an example of a STAR response. Again, if this gets recorded, you guys are going to be able to see this in more granular detail later on. But one thing to note that is really important is two other things: do differently and learned. So if you are answering a question where something didn't work out, one of the most important things you can do, and not on every question, because it might get you talking too much. So every odd question, it's like what I would have done differently after you answer the result, or what you learned from the process. That is where you start to show me those skills around curiosity and learning and creativity and resilience. Okay? Okay, great. So knowing thyself, like I said before, if you're not confident and clear, don't jump into that process. See if you can, obviously I'm biased because I got to work with coaches that helped me. Those really help. Or get an accountability buddy or some kind of a success circle. People that can help reflect with you some of your strengths, some of your wonderful gifts, procure feedback from previous direct reports, whatever information you can get that helps you understand who you are and keep the stuff that matters to you. So it's really, really important. And your interview, people will think that, okay, or they'll sense it rather. So what does an interview look like? I hope you guys are all doing good, because I am talking a lot here. I wish I could see your faces. All right. So an interview looks like, formal interview is panel. Has anyone had panel before? Now it's like the Brady Bunch on Zoom. And a lot more people are doing panel because of this. Yes, Sahila, yeah, and Taki, yeah, you see it. So panels in person can be terrifying. Yeah, very, very terrifying. But in executive interviews, they can be quite common, especially when you're doing what I'm saying later is presentations. Structured and unstructured on-site. So now I say remote, but before it used to be on-site, in-person structured interview processes. you'll find a lot more companies than you would realize are very unstructured in their interview process. So that's something to be noting, because unstructured process, there's lots of data that shows that they're not going to get as much as what they need. So let's see here.
Can I
now.
just add something to that too?
Yeah, go.
That I know you want to say is, when they have really unstructured process, that means they might not cover everything that they need to know about you, or even everything that you need to know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Teresa's going to talk a lot about what that's about. And we also have a whole resource for you around how to make sure that if you're in that kind of unstructured interview process, you don't get totally lost.
Exactly. And so, yeah, there's like, I think, and you guys remember the questions like, if you reduce the size of a nickel and you land in a blender, and how do you get out? Well, if you read Laszlo Block's book, Work Rules by Google, if you are okay with Google, and some people like, nah, maybe not, but they had some interesting data sets, which I found very interesting on how people interviewed effectively. And all that did was serve to make the interviewer look smart and the interviewee look dumb. Yay, great qualifier. Fabulous. Do those. Not. Okay. Informal interviews, on-site or remote chats. So we can't underestimate. I have been tricked on this even with all of my experience, and I thought I was going for coffee, and then boom, it's an interview, and I was just having a bad day, and I'm like, and I started to babble, and I'm like, I get to practice what I preach. Don't underestimate these chats. They are interviews. Meals and coffees, if we're back in person, these are all interviews, but they are informal. They'll say it's not, but it is. Recruiter check-ins, huge. They're checking in on you, they're collecting data the whole way. I used to use the receptionist and the coordinator as part of my interview team. We would collect data on how pleasant and how resilient and adaptable you were when you were working with the coordinator on email, and then how you greeted people. I had people, kid you not, overlook the receptionist and just be like, yeah, I need to talk to someone. We're like, there was even one interesting, what was it, a show I had watched on interviewing, where this one manager would lean over the atrium fencing area, and they would try and see who held open the door for people. Now that's a little extreme, maybe not such an accurate indicator, but still fascinating. They could have just been nervous and in their head, so it wouldn't be an effective measure of a human being, but still fascinating. So I even used the janitor once. It's terrible. I was just curious. All right, so the next one's presentation or case study. This can be really, if it's really intimidating for you, this is a really great place to pause, because most executive positions require lots of presentations, lots of analysis. So if you're uncomfortable doing this in an interview setting, find out where it's fear, and find out where it's like, I materially do not want to do this kind of thing. So it's a really good data point. 30, 60, 90-day plan. Some companies will be like, well, what are you going to do to solve our problem in finance that we have? And they'll give you a problem that they want you to solve. There is some talk of some companies just saying, yeah, do a 30, 60, 90-day plan and interview for us, and suddenly they get your wonderful information and then they ghost you, and you basically have given them thousands of dollars worth of free consulting. It's the exception, not the rule. So if you have a really light front end on your interview process, where maybe they're not investing a lot in recruitment and understanding who you are, maybe that's an indicator that something might be up and they're looking for some free consulting. But if you are doing your diligence, which I will talk about later, hopefully you know something more about the company than just the interview process. Maybe you know some people who know people who work there, and so on and so forth. But yeah, exactly. So thanks, Vivian. Yeah, exactly. So let's see, where was I? I was so interested in your chats. So so presentations are great because they help you, they help the recruiters understand how you think, your work habits, how you strategize, how you organize. Don't hesitate to ask them for more information. This is an indicator of what it's like to work with them. Have they given you partial information? That might be part of the test, whether intentional or unintentional, on behalf of the company that's interviewing. Did you come prepared, convincing, credible, logical, compelling? It's as close as you can get to a work product. So, all right. We have talked now about assessing our skills. Do we have the needed foundation abilities to do leadership roles? And then We are considering the investment in time and preparation because there's a good amount, and we can do this over the long tail or for a specific interview process. And now, because so many interviews tend to suck, as we've all agreed, I hope it's okay to say suck, I feel like I'm swearing, and the failure rate of executives is really high, we want to take charge. We want to own our interview. You can't trust a company to do this for you. So how do we own our interview process? Knowing how to tell your story is a big piece. Tell me about yourself. This is like a 2-3 hour workshop in and of itself to build up some meat, but you can start by understanding what are the strengths that light you up and what are stories that you can tell that support that. Research is also enormous in terms of your interview process. So financials, if you're interviewing with a private company, what is some competitive analysis out there? Like, what are the competitors doing? Is the market lifting up? Is it going down? Do you know someone that works there? If it's a public company, you should be able to read those financial numbers in the stock market, understand share price and movement. If you don't, get someone who can translate it for you. These are all really needed skills and things you can talk to that show that you are also a business expert as well as being an executive in your own domain. Networking with people who used to work there or do work there or know people who do, don't underestimate how powerful that is, and make your inroads without being too obtuse. And then creating a checklist, but not any checklist. We're going to call this big checklist, so big, so massive that it's a framework. So I'm going to walk you through this. How are we doing for time here? So we're at 6:37. Okay. So we're doing okay. I think I'm on a titch on the long side, so I'll speed it up a little bit for you. Okay, first one, this is a framework that you can use. So just like when you, as executives, leaders, are building out position profiles and doing some due diligence on your end about what you want a job to check off on certain core capabilities and attributes and so on and so forth, so the candidate should have a framework and a list that we check off to make sure that we are getting the amount of information we need to make a very informed decision, okay? So we create our framework checklist. Okay, so first of all, responsibilities. So what does the business plan call for with this role? Can they talk about the business plan with you? What does that look like? What's the goal, the results they're looking for this new executive to produce? You're taking notes while you go through your interview process. Again, is it, you know, you can also use your diagnosis tool where it's like sustaining success, is it startup, so on and so forth. And then the history of it's really fascinating. Is this a new headcount? Did someone get fired? Why did they get fired? You can ask those questions like, is this a new or a backfill? If it's a backfill, if they act all cagey, don't give up, okay? There's a reason. If you need help with that, we can talk to you about that because it's delicate, but it's very important. Okay, leadership style. You know, of course, as a leader, you're wanting to bend and you know, towards the situation, situational leadership, for lack of a better word. But what is the dominant style that's needed today? Because it might change between 5 years and now. So maybe it's like, okay, we need you to be a heroine now, but in a few years, we're going to have this acquisition and this situation, so we're going to need you to be a little bit more of like, you know, like a steward with your diplomatic skills. Okay, so your adaptability and your flexibility and interpersonal skill, those are huge pieces of leadership skill. Being able to demonstrate those, how much are they needed and required of you? There's a type, like some people, there's many different schools of thoughts on types of leadership and leadership style. Don't get too hung up, just understand a little bit more about your sweet spot where you love to be. But some people use supportive, delegative, coaching, and directing, and then they move between those, okay? Authority, have they shown you an org chart? So I know everyone's like, we're flat, we're so flat, I call BS. Sometimes it's not flat, most of the time it's not. So getting an understanding of the formal and informal organizational chart networks is huge. And I'll have executives, and I make sure I put through to them an organizational chart that tells them these are the lines of least responsibility, even if it's confusing. And if it's confusing, that's a data point for you to dig into. Why is it? Like, where is there clarity needed? Stronger and weaker departments, can you find out about that? That's always really interesting. I'm like, Oh, Susan over there. Oh, what a basket case. Woo! Data point. They talk behind each other's back. Leadership team is fractured. Note to self. People manager versus individual contributor, making sure you understand that. By the way, another pro tip is when you are in an executive role, one of the key pieces to ensuring your success is making sure you have enough resources to do the role. And one of the key resources is having a big enough team. So once you have an understanding, a very clear understanding of the KPIs, KRAs, whatever they want to call them, the goals and the expected outcomes of the role, make sure you meet with your hiring manager that's responsible and you codify it really, really quickly. What is needed in that regard. I totally lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Okay, it's gone. But what was it, KRAs? What was I saying, Holly?
I too got distracted by the chat, Teresa. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
If somebody else knows, please let us know in the chat, since that's where all of our attention is.
Yeah. KRAs. Oh, people. Right. You need enough people on your team. You like a lot of executives, one of the other reasons a lot of executives fail is because they don't have enough people on their team to be able to do the job they need to do, and then they're overwhelmed and frustrated and off they go. Oh my goodness, short circuit in the brain. Thanks for your patience. Okay, and then also being very clear about, in this particular organization, and be intentional. These are questions you need to ask and be forthright about. What is the difference between a manager and director? Between a VP and a director? What are your levels, if they do have levels? What does that look like? And you can even talk at the beginning about, okay, so what does it take for me to get to the next level? Talk about it at the beginning, but get your resources guaranteed as much as you can on email us something ahead of time, because sometimes they'll say, yeah, we'll give you lots of people. Oh yeah, and I was gonna mention that quick little story. I sat down with an executive once who wanted to hire me to be a VP of HR. And they're really, really nice and really keen, and oh, they're so lovely. And as we talked, I said, well, what's your cash position like? And he was like, oh, it's really terrible. We have hardly any cash, blah, blah, blah. And then he started to talk about the relationship with the board. And he's talking about the board. He's like, oh my gosh, they want us to grow 18x in a period of time. And it's like, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this is like Series C funded, accelerated. They have no assets, they have no cash. And I said to him, well, I'm only interested in the job if I can do a lot of learning and development material as opposed to just, taking care of the HR faction. He's like, oh, we'll fund you. After learning about their cash position, the board relationship, everything was like, nope, I call baloney. You won't be able to fund me. You are gonna want to fund the endeavors that I want to be able to do for your team, which I see that they might need, but you can't fund me. That makes sense? Okay, all right, I hope it does. Thank you, Louisa. Mwah. I love feedback. Okay, thank you, Janine. So performance requirements, basic stuff. You know these ones, but don't underestimate. Thorough on all these different things. Interesting, sometimes executives are hired for their industry knowledge as opposed to, or they're hired for their contacts. So reputation, who you know. You can bring them a whole team sometimes, it just depends. Industry is specific for experience requirements, like is it have to be in the industry of healthcare, or can it be domain knowledge that's really required? And what is the absolute non-negotiable execution parameters that are flexible, but the ones that are not? So this being clear, again, this one is really easy checklist part on this one. The next one makes me laugh. I like David Bowie, so we put him in here. So your value alignment, their personal qualities and styles. So knowing your values and how they match. The interesting thing about being an executive in a leadership position, as many of you will know, is that you are a change agent, no matter if you like it or not. You bring culture with you, you bring approach, because you're on display 10x compared to other people because you're in a leadership role. So do they want you to come in to counter the culture, or do they want you to come in to promote it? Because those are strategic hiring decisions. Do they want, then Bowie or now Nowie, right? So you get to get some clarity on that, and it will help you understand if this is really aligned with what you want. Interpersonal alignment, can they articulate? Just like I told you the story before, can they even articulate their vision of what they want to do? Sometimes right now, if you're looking right now, it's a little bit hard. People are like, we're not sure, but what are they sure of? And is that good enough for you? Can they articulate their why? Another important one for the future is customer and client focus, right? I know. I hear you, Ty. Customer focus and client focus. Very current innovative companies are going to be ones that are paying attention as opposed to feeling like they know everything. They're going to be really having more communications with these clients and customers. And organizational agility, future prepared. So the recent events in the last couple of months, 3 months, has made people really jerk into future preparedness, whether they like it or not. But still, even though everything's really jerky right now, are they talking about, 2, 3, 5 years? And are they entertaining, like changing the nature of the workforce? Is it going to be all full-time? Is it gigs? Is it gigsters? Is it around the world? Is it outsourced? Very important information to help you understand if you're going to have the tools you need to be successful and if the company will survive, let alone thrive. So organizational alignment, simple. Do you like your boss, your potential boss? Do you mesh with your peers? This is what I mean by fit. I'm not trying to cram you into anything. I'm trying to get you to understand, does this fit with what you want? Okay. So information also on like who succeeds and who doesn't. As much background as you can get, because that can have a huge impact. Okay, so remember, this checklist is about what works for you, not about how you squeeze into their little into a shape for somebody else.
And let me just throw something in here about fit and like Tack's comment that it can be a dog whistle for white people hiring more white people. That's 100% true. That can definitely be the case. And I agree with what Teresa's saying, that when we're talking about fit here, really what we're talking about is this going to be something that works for you as a person? It's really good to think about hiring people as in, what do they add to the culture? But if you're thinking as a person who's going to get hired, what do I add? And that's all you're thinking, you're actually missing a crucial piece, which is like, I could add a lot, but do I want to? Would this be terrible for me? So that's kind of the spirit that we mean this in. But absolutely, be really cautious around companies that talk exclusively about fit. I think that's maybe a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, this is all for you. This is not about squeezing you into what someone else needs. This is about you deciding if the fit is for you.
Yeah, and getting the information you need to decide if you're going to run towards them or away from them.
Exactly. And I'll tell this, like, so much in our culture is trying to get you to, fit yourself into a mold for companies. But what I tell people, that's why I harp on knowing yourself, because you're this beautiful, unique, nobody like you human being. So what are those interesting and maybe not so interesting parts of you that are so fascinating and wonderful? And can we communicate them in a way that other people will find that like able to receive that information? So that's where the storytelling skills, and also making sure you understand what's relevant for them. They're speaking a certain language. Can I bridge that language without compromising my uniqueness? Does that make sense? Okay. I love all of you, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk compensation. Show me the money. So basic, okay? Make sure you're getting these conversations started at the beginning. Sign-on bonuses are usually used in executive hiring when we need to bridge a gap. So there's some inconvenience that's happening, whether it's I have to lose a bonus from my work that I'm currently at. There's some issues around timing with my kids in school, whatever it is. Sign-on bonuses tend to be used for that. But then some companies are so desperate to get you, they're going to throw it at you. And you're like, great. Long-term, so those are, and then short-term incentive plans. That's what STIP stands for. Sometimes you can negotiate not just the usual bonus, but you can negotiate milestone bonuses, incentivize goals that are cash-based. There's all sorts of fun things. You can see a lot of this if you search it online. And guaranteed minimum, like you can even say this is a guaranteed minimum annual incentive, which makes me laugh because is it a bonus or is it just money? Thank you very much.
What's an example, Teresa, of some of those milestone or project-based incentive packages you're talking about?
Oh, well, simple. You ship this, you get money. Your team gets flown to well, I guess you can't right now, but to Disneyland before, you get a claim, you get an extra conference budget, developmental incentives. I mean, the world's your oyster. You can even negotiate it as an executive. Like, if we do this, this is what I want, and this is why. So you can actually have a lot of fun with short-term incentive plans. Long-term, those are the stock options, profit sharing, employee stock purchase plans. Ask if they have each of those: stock options, profit sharing, employee stock purchase plans. Those can be material your compensation package. Okay.
And if you want to know more about that, email me. We've got a great resource from 2 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. This is really, really, it can go in depth. Benefits are non-cash compensation. Um, they don't factor into your number, but you can talk to them like they do. It just depends on the type of relationship you have with the recruiter. And by the way, make friends with your recruiter. If your recruiter loves you, they're going to go to bat for you. And so don't make enemies with your recruiter if you don't have to. But health and life insurance, do they have RSP match? That can be huge, the RSP match, the paid vacation. As a rule of thumb, 1 week of paid vacation is equivalent to 2% in salary. So if you want to just do some cold numbers on there, adding an extra week, that can add some benefit to you. Professional development, like when you are in an executive level position, and maybe even more importantly, you're in a stretch role. So you're consciously aware of incompetence, if you will, and you're wanting to build a particular skill set that's necessary for this ability to perform the role. You can negotiate getting an executive coach of some kind, or maybe they have some kind of training or development that's available. Get this stuff talked about at the beginning. This is where you have that leverage to be able to do this. And even ongoing education funding. You can negotiate something for yourself, and even you can negotiate for your team sometimes. Perks, phones, credit cards, company cards, gym memberships, first class air travel. Who knows if it's going to happen again. Financial tax, real estate planning services, legal planning services, college tuition for kids. Golden parachute. Anyone heard about a golden parachute before? You have, Holly? Yeah, we heard about them in Enron. Remember that? So golden parachutes are when you get really, really senior, and they really, really want you, and they know that if you leave, the business could absolutely tank in a certain way. That's when you can negotiate golden parachutes. Okay. So yes, that's right, Elizabeth. Stock, yep, long-term incentive plans. Did I not say that? Thank you if I didn't. All right, termination provisions. This is also a good one to note. In the States, you don't have this as much in certain states that are at will. I just dealt with like a supremely senior executive, and they got 2 months. And I was just like, you're kidding me. And he was with the company for 8 years. And they were like super senior, New York, flashy. And it was like, wow, that's really, yeah, yikes, exactly. So, but up here in Canada, you can negotiate. I've seen executives negotiate on the very senior roles 3 to 6 months. So if you don't negotiate this on the front end, you're likely not going to get it on the back end. Okay.
And to be clear just about that, like it's really easy to look at that and like, damn, that's a lot of money. Also, these interview processes take 3 to 6 months. So it kind of isn't that much cash, right? If you're sitting there going, oh, I could only ask for a month, like you literally can't afford to only ask for a month. Does that make sense?
Yes. So some companies will not budge, but you can go to sleep knowing that you tried. So severance packages, just to sum it up, can extend to executive ranks. And some executives offer 6 to 12 months, sometimes 3 months, depending on because if a company's small, they don't have a lot of cash, it's really hard to do, as well as prorated bonuses in the event their employment is terminated. So you can even negotiate bonus as well. Great, we're almost there, people. All right, and then business health. Like I talked a little bit about this before. I say SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I love it if a company has done this, that the executives can talk to this. This is a very interesting exercise. If they haven't done it, maybe the interview process involves, having them show this to you, okay? And then mutual NDAs. You're gonna be talking about sensitive stories. They're gonna be talking about sensitive things. So you want a mutual NDA at the beginning. Some people just do an NDA. I tend to prefer mutual NDAs to protect you as well. Public company, like I said before, checking the financials. Again, the time investment, you're going to be doing a lot of research beyond just the usual Glassdoor and the LinkedIn and the word of mouth. And private, we talked about that, looking at competitors in the market and so forth. So that was the checklist or framework, big, large framework. And yes, exactly. If you need help on the financial side, and like I always recommend a lawyer for senior level roles. I even had one when I was going into a manager role once because I didn't like the offer letter. It was like a bit of a hack job. So I got a lawyer to look at the paperwork. and then I charged it back to them. Ah, so final tips: prepare, prepare, prepare. Isn't that obvious? And then it's so important you take charge of the experience. You want to take charge in a diplomatic, you're going to be showing your influencer skills. You want to be taking charge in a way that doesn't make you come across like a like this, or maybe the company wants that. You're going to discover it, but it's really important for you to own your process, given the statistics and given what I've seen in a lot of companies. And the interview process is very, very, very much two-way. And again, just as a reminder, keep track of your accomplishments and your challenges. And one other thing I just want to say at the end is you got this, because the interview process is super, like for most people, it's really hard. It's like, hey, can I go step in a room with two people I barely know and they judge me? And most likely, statistically, they're going to reject me. It's hard. So when you're going through a job hunt process, in addition, I'm talking very tactical stuff in this conversation with people today, but it's running the business of you, taking care of you as a whole person as you move through a process like this. Do you have a support system? Maybe it's a group of people. Maybe you've got some fellow job seekers that are doing this alongside you, and you can create goals and sprints together. And then you can also talk about like, hey, this is a really hard experience. I feel like I need to cry because I don't have any feelings of control. And I feel like they want me to be something that I'm not. So being very clear on who you are, knowing yourself, giving yourself the emotional, mental health and social support, as well as being methodical about the business side of running your business, of finding one of these jobs, is a really important balance to strike. I have so much empathy for, there's some really bad interview processes out there, and there's ones that are wonderful. And we all know, like, I know many people who took jobs because the interview process was wonderful. And so that's really considerable. So that is basically it.